Well, good afternoon. Want to welcome you to another Lunchtime Hot Topic, November 16th. We've got a pretty good agenda for today. You're going to hear from Dr. Scott Meyers, another update on KSDE. We also have Jay Scott will be providing an update, what's working moving forward with individual plans of study, as well as we have a team that'll be in giving you an update on where we're headed with ESSA. So a lot has been transpiring over the last few months. A lot of work going on across the state. Just want to thank everybody. We have districts piloting interim assessments, doing a lot of work around transitioning to college algebra, civic engagement, kindergarten readiness. So a lot of great things going on, and want to thank all the districts out there that have been volunteering and jumping in and doing a lot of heavy lifting in these areas. It's been an exciting year. I want to remind you that throughout this, if you have questions, topics, need additional answers, just submit those to lunchtime@ksde.org. We've had some really good input on that, so we appreciate those of you that have been submitting your thoughts, comments, and questions. So with that, I will turn it over to the next group.
Well, good afternoon. This is Jay Scott. I'm at the Kansas State Department of Education, and I've got with me Natalie Clark. She's also at KSDE. She's our business education consultant, and we are presenting today to the Lunchtime Hot Topics group. Hope you're all having a great day. We are presenting today on job shadow learning experiences for Kansas students. One of the work-based learning opportunities for high school students that we feel is very important for all students, not just some, but for all students, is a job shadow experience. And so with that in mind, this year we've set out to create a statewide program, or at least resources and guidelines on how to set up a job shadow experience for all students. So to define it, a job shadow, so we're all talking the same language, is a brief work-based learning experience for all students. This isn't maybe like an internship, which would just be for some students that have already career selected and are already moving towards that as they are as part of their high school careers. But the job shadow experience for students should be for all students so that they have an authentic work-based learning experience, albeit at a superficial level, but hopefully it's a level that lets them, gives them an authentic look into specific careers. So what does a typical job shadow look like? It's on site, so we know we have a lot of really good simulated work-based learning experiences that happen within the school walls. But a job shadow, by definition, is on site, actually in the business industry facility, whether it's in the hospital or if it's at the accounting office, but it's on site. There is interaction with clients and or customers, depending on the type of job shadow experience that you're setting up and the career interests of the student. And this is the last bullet point on this slide, might be the most important, is that these are not, they don't necessarily need to be one-on-one, one student to one business industry member for a job shadow experience. This can be group experiences. We know that especially with younger students, the transportation and coordination and setting up these types of experiences can be really a big undertaking. So to help mitigate that, with job shadow experiences, if you have maybe a critical mass of students that are interested in health science careers, then they could participate in a group job shadow experience at the hospital or at the clinic, where a lot of the transportation issues and those things could be minimized. So on-site interaction with adults in business industry, their clients or customers, and can be a group experience. So why job shadow in high school? And I always like to tell the story. One of our KSDE staff members, actually, when she was in third grade, she had already identified she wanted to be a registered nurse and went through her whole high school, her whole K-12 career and into post-secondary, wanting to be a registered nurse. Went to a smaller school in Kansas. They did not have a health science pathway. There was not a hospital in the community, and so she really missed out on any type of job shadow experiences with being a registered nurse, other than just seeing that maybe I don't know, on TV, or maybe they had family members that were involved in as being registered nurses. But that was she had limited experience, so she entered into a program at the post-secondary level. And sometime during that program, clinicals started. At the first day of clinicals, when the clinical students had to observe an IV being inserted, she passed out. And so she had already gone through and paid money into that program and taken classes, and she was able to pivot out of that. But what a better time for that to happen would have been in high school, when maybe the time and the money aspect weren't so on the line as they are when you get to the post-secondary level. So there is a trend, kind of an alarming trend, of students that now that they're career exploring their first 2 years of post-secondary, and that can lead to delays and a lot of debt. And two aspects that we're really focused on improving as far as student outcomes for students at the post-secondary level is lessening the student loan debt and increasing the I guess he can edit that part out, but taking out the delays that some students have in moving from the program to the credential and into careers. So we think a job shadow experience in high school can help mitigate some of those things. So the value of job shadowing: it's a safe time for students to investigate careers in an authentic manner. It allows students to reinforce or rethink their career interests, so which we think is highly valuable for the student. It either strengthens their resolve, I guess, towards those career interests, and or they rethink it and pivot and move a different direction. So, and with that, before I turn it over to Natalie, how can a job shadow program be built? Through our IPS process in Kansas, which you'll also hear about today on Hot Topics. Students, that's the first thing really to develop an individual plan of study, is students identify career interests. So that's one aspect of a job shadow program. And then staff, student, and the business and the employers involved in that, there needs to be some sort of orientation for that job shadow program. Partnering with regional and or local workforce development is a huge area of growth in Kansas for this. We have chambers, we have economic development folks locally, and just partnering with them to pull off these work-based learning experiences for our students is very, very important. And then the last thing is reaching out to businesses to actually set up the job shadow experiences. And we know that schools are connected with businesses through advisory committees or other types of organizations and activities. So banking on that partnership with businesses to set up job shadow experiences would be an essential component of that program. Okay, so enough about what it is and what it looks like. Now I'm going to turn it over to Natalie, and she's going to talk to you about Newton schools and their job shadow program.
Good afternoon. I'm pleased to be with you today. I would like to talk a little bit about Newton High School. Newton High School's Director of Career and Technical Education, Melinda Rangel, presented at a multi-state business education conference as well as our state CTE conference this summer, and she plans to present at the National Business Education Association Annual Convention in Chicago in April in 2017. And she'll be speaking about the implementation of job shadowing and internships at Newton High School. We thank Melinda for sharing her resources with KSDE and with others. We have followed Newton High School model this year as they go through the steps of implementing the one-day job shadows. The CTE director coordinates the job shadow experiences, and there is currently not a class that facilitates the process. So today we're going to go through the process and look at the documentation that Newton High School uses for their job shadow program. Planning for the job shadow. These are the steps that they go through before the students actually go out to business and industry. Staff prepares a checklist for each student. Melinda goes into the classrooms and talks to the students. The students that would like to participate in job shadow meet with her to discuss their interests. So this is the document that she goes through from beginning to end and has on file for each student. The student, in meeting with the director, discusses their career interests. They choose 2 career interests in different fields that they would like to pursue and give feedback as far as what type of business or if they have a preference of a business in town. They indicate whether they have transportation and whether they believe they can drive out of the city of Newton. The student is also required to sign a document saying they will respect the rules and regulations that are to be followed in the job shadow. They say that they will do a good job and portray a positive image. They say they will be honest and they will have a cooperative and respectful attitude. They'll indicate that they know that all of the information that they may see is confidential, as well as personal phone calls and visits will be unacceptable during the job shadows. They will be informed of the business rules for dress, conduct, and personal appearance when they're on the site. And they will arrive on time and be aware that all of the rules of Newton High School will apply to them when they are on the job site. The student also will make sure that the permission form is signed by their parents so that the parents will know that they'll be absent from class and participating in a job shadow off campus. The parents will be informed of the business name and a contact name. They will also be informed that the students will be required to follow up with observation and interview questions. The student will evaluate the business and their experience, and they will summarize their experience as well as send a thank you note to the business. An important piece of this is the consent release statement. The parent is allowing their student to participate in the shadow, and they are releasing the employer and the school district from any and all liabilities as a result of the shadow placement. And they also understand that the student is responsible for transportation to and from, and that all school regulations apply while the student is participating in the shadow. So this form must be on file, and business and industry will be aware that the form is in place. This is a form that staff or the director would fill out to give to the student. So once the student is matched with a business, it gives the student the arrival time, the business name, and a contact. It also will suggest the attire or what the student should wear for the day. It will give lunch specifics, whether they are to bring a lunch or if they'll have time for lunch. And also a reminder that's reminding the student to be sure and arrive 10 minutes ahead of time. And if they're sick, it reminds them to call the business indicated above as well as the high school. The process for during the job shadow. The student is required to observe and answer interview questions. They will interview the business person and they will summarize the responses following their shadow. Some of the things they're encouraged to ask the business What is your educational background? What's the most challenging part of your job? What tools or equipment do you use? How many hours a week do you work? What are the skills your company values most? And what is the one thing that surprised you most after starting the job? So these are samples to get the students started, and the business and industry will have a copy of these questions, so they will be prepared for what the student will ask. After the job shadow, this is the process that the Newton High School goes through. The business is asked to evaluate the student and return it to the director. The student is evaluated on, were they punctual? Did they attend the shadow for the time that they had agreed upon? Was the student's dress and grooming appropriate? And were they courteous and considerate? It also asks about their communication skills, if they seemed interested and focused, and if the questions were thoughtful, and if they in fact followed up and conducted an interview with the business contact. The student is also asked to evaluate the business and their job shadow experience. The student will be answering the question, was the employer expecting you when you arrived? Did you feel welcome when you arrived? And did the student feel that the period of time they were there was too short, too long, or was it about right? And then finally, would you recommend this employer to another student for job career shadowing? This is a piece that could be put in the portfolio. This is a student summary of their shadowing experience. It asks what they learned, if they felt that they were exposed to more than one occupation, what they liked, what they did not like, and if the skills they possessed, if they felt like they would need to add to the skills, and what they would need to learn if they in fact would like to go into this career. There's a staff evaluation, and this would be placed in the student file, asking if the student had completed the requirements of the job shadow process, if they had completed their career assessments, attended a pre-shadow meeting, and returned the signed permission form and rules and regulation back to the teacher. Assessing the last components, they completed a summary, an evaluation, and they wrote a thank you note to the business. Newton High School has partnered with Kansas Workforce One to host Building Bridges, an annual event. Building Bridges was established to develop connections between education, business, and industry. The event that's held invites teachers, students, and parents, and they're encouraged to come and network with business and employees of all different skill and professional levels to participate in developing a workforce in and around Harvey County. And through these partnerships in this event, job shadows and internships have been established.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Natalie. That was a lot.
Sure.
That's a really good look at the before, the during, and the after, the details around a job shadow program that is very, very robust at Newton Schools. And we want to take the time to thank Melinda Rangel and Newton Schools for not only setting up a program like that really benefits and helps their students matriculate from high school to careers, but sharing all the materials, all their documents. And I want to thank Natalie for leading this effort here at KSDE. This year, our just some deliverables for us this year and into the next school year for the Job Shadow Project. We want to survey districts by February 1st, send that out to survey districts to get an idea of what's already going on in our districts. We want to develop a toolkit, which many of the resources that you saw today from Newton Public Schools and Melinda Rangel will be part of that toolkit. So we're going to develop that toolkit by the end of the current school year. make that available. One of the aspects, the specific aspects of a job shadow program is an employability skills checklist that we think will be highly valuable. And by the end of this current school year, we'll have that developed for schools to use with their students. A lot of times when we're talking about work-based learning experiences, business and industry indicates that they want to make sure that the students have some baseline development of employability skills before they will agree to let the student participate on site. And so we think an employability skills checklist would satisfy that the student and the teacher with the student in that job shadow program or the CTE coordinator would go through that checklist, use that with the students so they can get a set of baseline of employability skills, and then share that information with business and industry to ensure that they have been trained and they have reached a certain level with employability skills. And then lastly, developing a training model for the 17-18 school year using the toolkit, using all these resources that we've identified today, and in an effort to scale job shadows across the state. So with that, that concludes our lunchtime hot topic on job shadow program. We want to thank you for your attention. If you have any questions or comments about the job shadow program in Kansas, please feel free to contact Natalie Clark here at KSDE or myself, Jay Scott, here at the department. We'd be happy to help you. And I also want to leave you with this. If you have a job shadow program currently in your school, please let us know. We're always looking to broadcast and try to scale bright spots. So if you have a job shadow program already set up, please let us know. Additionally, we will have additional resources ready to go as we move forward this year around job shadows. So with that, we will conclude our time. Thank you very much.
Okay, my name is Tateman. I'm an education program consultant on the Early Childhood Special Education and Titles team. Today, during our Hot Topics session, we'll be reviewing just quickly some of the evidence-based intervention and system improvement information that Dean Zeitz presented last time, and then tying that together with our state plan that we're in the process of starting to send into the Department of Education. And we'll finish up with a quick review of the timeline for the state plan and then some general overall dates for the Every Student Succeeds Act timeline as we go forward. Okay, as we talk about the evidence-based interventions and systematic improvement, we're talking about mainly the cyclical framework for maximizing the results. And this is just a quick view of the 5 main things we look at that Dean talked about in one of our recent hot topics. We need to identify the local needs, find an evidence base, and use the local capacity when we're choosing the strategy, because we want to make sure whatever we're going to do that we do have the capacity to do this. Then we're going to have to come up with a robust plan, provide the resources to put that plan in place and make sure that is well supported. Then on a regular basis, we're going to have to examine the strategy and then come back, reflect, and inform our next steps. And as we're working on our state plan, this is kind of what we're going to do as a state and our agency to make sure we come up with a plan that shows what we are doing in Kansas to implement the changes to the Elementary and Secondary Education Act that were presented by ESSA. And at the bottom is the guidance, because this guidance came from Title II Part A, Building Systems of Support. And what we've seen so far is the Department of Ed has been putting out plenty of guidance, and we expect more in the next 4 to 6 weeks, helping districts and states implement the Every Student Succeeds Act. And this is kind of the graph of that last page in the 5 different areas. As you see, we talked about those 5 areas that are outside the identify local needs. You'll select your approach, you'll plan, you'll implement, and you'll examine and reflect. But through every one of those steps, there should be consultation. At the district level with teachers, staff, administrators, support staff, and the local community and the stakeholders. And that's how we're going to try to implement and get our state plan written too. Is we've identified some of the local needs. We've heard from some of our advisory councils. We've received questions through our ESSA questions log. We're working on the approach, and we've put that together, and now we're going to start writing the plan. During this time, which we'll go into more detail, we'll start getting more stakeholder input. Once we have the plan in place, it'll be sent to the Department of Ed, and then we'll start to implement. One of the keys under the No Child Left Behind Act was in 2002, we had our plans, and some of those did not ever change until the waiver came. And then the waiver changed some of those, and others still stayed like they were in 2002. What we submit to the Department of Ed may not change. However, during this Every Student Succeeds Act era, as a state and the school districts, we're going to continue to examine and reflect what we're doing to make sure we're doing the best to help all students in Kansas succeed. So a quick overview of our Kansas State Consolidated Plan. Sandy Goodry is our lead on this plan, and myself, Tate Tateman, will be her lead assistant to help her get this out. So whenever you see stuff about the state plan, most of the time it'll be coming from Sandy Goodry or myself, or possibly other directors or leaders at the Kansas State Department of Education. So first of all, what does it mean for a consolidated plan? There are many different parts to the Every Student Succeeds Act that have been reauthorized. And on this page, we list the major components that are going to go into this plan. Previously, all of these areas had their own plans that were submitted. The state of Kansas has chosen to submit one plan for all these programs. So there'll be certain areas where each of these programs combine into one area, and then there'll still be unique parts to each one in separate pieces of the plan. So in each of these areas, we'll have different people in charge of leading the writing of the plan. And these different areas are listed here. Under Title I, there's 4 main areas. The Improving Education Programs, which is the typical Title I. This is the at-risk program. The largest component of funding comes into this. All districts in the state of Kansas receive Title I Part A funds. The next section is Title IB, the grants for state assessments and related activities. This is what we use to help with our state assessments, to promote them, to do the research, anything that's associated with our state assessments that we use for federal accountability comes out of Title IB. Our Title IC is our migrant programs, which is overseen by Doug Boleen. Same thing with our Title ID. Doug will be one of the major players in that at this point through the neglected, delinquent, or at-risk programs. Then Title IIA is supporting effective instruction. This is where most people think about for professional development, but we also have class size reduction, mentoring. Under the new law, we also see more for principals and paraprofessionals in 2A. In Title III, our English learners and immigrant programs, which is led by Julie Ewing. And then Title IV, we have 2 major parts. Title IVA is a new block grant fund for grants for student support and academic enrichment. This includes a lot of previously individual competitive grants that are now combined under the Grants for Student Support and Academic Enrichment. We have received guidance on this program from the Department of Ed, but we still have not seen what type of appropriations, so we do not know what type of impact these will give to districts. Our Title IVB, which is our 21st Century Community Learning Center grants, which are overseen by Chris Macy. Then we also have Title 5B, which are our rural and low-income school programs. Nicole Clark handles most of the information on that. That's our Small Rural Schools Achievement Act and our Rural Low Income School Program. Districts qualify for one of those two programs. Occasionally we'll have a district qualify two, but you may only accept one. And we always accept the one with the higher amount of allocation for the school district. And then our last one on this page is the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, which we've had some questions of why this is listed as Title VII on this page. This is listed as Title VII because the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act is under Title VII of that law. It was reauthorized under Title IX of the Every Student Succeeds Act. So the McKinney-Vento Act is separate from the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and that's why it's listed on Title VII of its own act, even though it was reauthorized by a different title. So those are the major parts that are consolidated into this one plan that the Kansas State Department of Education will be sending on to the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. So this next slide talks about our components. And basically we've divided out a draft plan that the Department of Ed has sent out to all states. It has not been finalized, but we don't expect many changes. So with that, Sandy and I have divided into the 5 components, which are consultation and coordination, challenging academic standards and academic assessments, accountability, support, and improvement for schools, supporting excellent educators, and supporting all students. And this list will be available on our ESSA website, along with some of the other information we're presenting today. The easiest way to get to the ESSA website on the KSDE website is to go to the main website, www.ksde.org, and under the subject index, click on the E's, and toward the very bottom of the E section is the Every Student Succeeds Act. You click on that link, and all of the information that the department is putting out on ESSA will be on that page, and you'll be able to find information about the state consolidated plan on that page as well. And as I said before, the state consolidated plan has 5 components. The first, consultation and coordination, stresses the importance of stakeholders in the process of writing the state plan. Within the law is a list of the stakeholders that should be involved. At KSDE, we have taken a look at this list and decided that the advisory council would be the best place to add folks that we might have been previously missing. By adding these people, we have also created a more balanced council. We were district and building leadership heavy at first. We have now added teachers, parents, and various organizations representing people throughout Kansas. The second component is the challenging academic standards and academic assessments. As many of you know, we are currently revising the Kansas standards in math and English language arts, and we will discuss that process in our state plan. We are also in the process of reducing the footprint of the summative state assessments and building a system of assessments that will benefit teaching and learning in the state of Kansas. The third component is around school accountability, support, and improvement. We will necessarily be doing the bulk of the work in this part of the plan. This part of the plan will contain objectives around the assessment, graduation, and other measures. It will also detail the process for identifying our schools that are eligible for targeted support and comprehensive support. And this is being led by Tammy Mitchell. And it will also explain the process for school improvement, including the Kansas Learning Network, which Michelle Hayes is overseeing. The fourth component of this will detail how KSDE will support districts who are trying to recruit, hire, and retain excellent educators across the state. This will include the process Kansas school districts have made in the areas of teacher leader evaluation, teacher leader mentoring, and teacher leader licensing, and partnering with our higher education partners. And the component supporting all students has a focus on the term all. And as you know, many of our title programs focus on specific student populations. Title I is an at-risk program for students. Title III is for English learners. We have programs for migrant students, neglected and delinquent students, immigrant students, as well as homeless students and students with disabilities. Though Kansas will write a consolidated plan with the notion that all means all, the law has some very specific provisions for specific groups of students. This component will cover those parts of the law that are not covered elsewhere. And with that said, we've also done a really good job of making sure that all of these areas are represented on our advisory council. Here is a look at our draft timeline for submitting the plan to the United States Department of Education. And first you'll see the word draft, and we emphasize that heavily. The July 1st date right now is pretty much set in stone, but there is some wiggle room for the rest of this draft. And we'd be very surprised if this timeline does not see some changes. The U.S. Department of Education's already received a great deal of pushback on their timeline. Currently, like I said before, we've chosen the July submission date, and this timeline reflects submission to go out on July 1st. We've pulled the dates that are significant to the Advisory Council and to the folks in the field. And currently at KSDE, we're making the decisions about what internal and external stakeholders should be involved in the writing of each component and their subcomponents. KSDE is pulling from our ESSA waiver, our current individual title plans, and other resources within the agency and the state. There is no need to start looking at building a brand new wheel. We've got a wheel that's functioning fairly well. We want to support that and make it even better with our consolidated state plan. And again, the final draft will be completed on July 1st, 2017 and submitted to the Department of Ed. So as you can tell, we're in the early stages of this plan, and we will start beginning to write this plan with the partnership of KSDE and some of our external stakeholders. We have an internal due date for components of this to be due by February 1st. During the next month and a half after that, we're going to look to our advisory councils to provide more feedback, to talk to us about things we may have missed, things we need to strengthen in our original draft plan. Then we'll take revisions and we'll complete a second draft toward the middle of April or the end of April. Our plan today is to post on May 1st for a 30-day required comment period on the Kansas State Department of Education website. And then after that 30-day comment period, start making revisions for the final plan based on the feedback received during that comment period. This is very much a general overview of the timeline. There are many other aspects that will go into the submission of this plan prior to the July 1st date. So specific questions on the plan or questions on the plan can be submitted to Sandry Guidry at sguidry@ksde.org. Her phone number is 785-296-1101. You can also submit general ESSA questions to our essaquestions@ksde.org email address. And we want to focus the state and our stakeholders on that this plan is going to be based on our existing initiatives. We have a lot of great activities and programs going on in the state. Some that have been recently started, which we have some of those that tie in very much to our plan listed on this page. We have our new accreditation system that's been rolled out, our KESA, our Kansas multi-tier system of supports. We have a lot of districts using Kansas Star right now, some that are going to be our comprehensive schools. We've got our priority and focus schools that have used Kansas Star over the past 4 years. We have some districts looking into using Kansas Star to help with accreditation, and we also have school-wides that are using Kansas Star. We also have information linked for our local consolidated plans, our specific school-wide building plans, and the Kansas Learning Network on this page. We mentioned the evidence-based interventions and systems of improvement. These are all websites and projects that can help us work on our systems, because that's one of the things we want to strengthen in Kansas is our educational systems. Make sure they are aligned to help provide our students what they need to be successful in school and to be successful high school graduates and on into their careers and college studies. The first one I want to point out to, this is the guidance for Title II that we mentioned earlier in the slideshow. Currently, Department of Ed has all kinds of guidance out there on ESSA. We encourage you to look at that. We will be in the future talking more specifically about the guidance in some of our hot topics in our special ed directors calls and in our Title I directors calls. Those two directors calls happen once a month. The hot topics is typically twice a month as we do these on a twice a month basis. Some important dates, one of which we've already passed is the October 1st date. On October 1st, 2016, the McKinney-Vento provisions under the Every Student Succeeds Act did go into effect. On December 10th, a small change to McKinney-Vento, the awaiting foster care part of the definition will be removed, and the foster care pieces of Title I go into effect December 10th that reinforce the stability rights for foster care students and also add some transportation rights. At this point, DCF and KSDE are working on getting a lot of information out to the field. We hope to have that out before the December 10th start. Doug Boline and Mark Ward here at the Kansas State Department of Education are our leads on foster care, working with DCF. And then the majority of the implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act will go into effect on July 1st of 2017. And just as a reminder, our Kansas students today are our future workforce and the future leaders of Kansas, and Kansans can achieve anything, and together Kansans can lead the world in the success of each student. Thank you very much for your time and all you do for the students in Kansas.
Well, good day. Welcome to the Lunchtime Hot Topics. I'm Jay Scott here at KSDE. I've got with me today Kathleen Mercer. She's a joint employee with KSDE and KBOR, and we're both working on individual plans of study as a statewide program. And so we are here today to present an update on where we are with individual plans of study in the state of Kansas. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen to talk about what she's going to talk about.
So I wanted to start off with a new guide that we've got on our website. It's an implementation guide for individual plan of study. I believe it's called an IPS implementation reference sheet. And so basically what this is for those schools who are beginning from scratch. If your school has not implemented individual plan of study and you're really not sure where to start, this is going to give you some guidance around what the steps that you could go through. So the first step, of course, is getting started. You're going to want to establish some school policies and determine your school's readiness to implement IPS. Develop a timeline to outline the process for implementation, and then you've got to figure out a team of people who are going to be invested in this project and leading this project for you and your staff and parents and students. As you are looking at writing those policies and setting up the process for implementation, the curriculum you're going to use, and so forth, we will also have another lengthier toolkit that can help you with the details of that if you feel like you need more direction. When you're looking at putting together a team, you want to include the principal, whoever's going to be your program coordinator, teachers, school counselors, parents, and community members. In particular, I want to highlight that the program coordinator is going to organize all of the IPS activities, distribute responsibilities to the team members, and they're basically going to serve as that program champion. They're going to be talking and walking IPS through the school every day. The principal also has a very important role in this, because if the principal can set this as a priority and show that there is a true commitment to the IPS program, that is going to go a long way to helping the staff understand that this is a priority. Looking at the sheet a little bit further, you're going to want to consider selecting and using a web-based guidance system. There are programs out there that can help you put together the 4 components of the individual plan of study easily. And in particular, we have a state preferred vendor that is Career Cruising. We are currently offering to help pay for your startup costs so that we can make that affordable for you to bring that product into your school. You're not required to use that program. You can put together your own program. You can use programs you've already had, like Cooter and Naviance, that have been in the market for a while. But when you're looking at any web-based guidance system, you want to consider some things. You want to see if they have self-assessment tools. Do they provide you with curriculum? Is there a parent access? What kind of reports can you get? Does it interface with your student information system? And what can your students save on it? Those are some of the things you'll want to look at. In particular, with the curriculum, it's important to look at the individual plan of study curriculum that you're using and determine how that can be crosswalked to elective courses or to some of the career counseling standards. You could be addressing some of the IPS curriculum already in your school with some of the specialists that we have. Your family and consumer science or your business teacher might be already teaching some of the skills that students need to complete the curriculum for individual plan of study in the coursework that they're doing. So it's good to take the time to evaluate exactly where the curriculum is going to be delivered depending on which components you're looking at. It's also important to set up a curriculum delivery timeline that allows for sequential concepts to eliminate repeating. What we mean by that is we don't want a student to start a resume in one class and start it over again in another class and then start it in their advisory period as well. We want them to start a resume, save it in one place, and build that resume over the 4 years that they are working on it so they can see the final product once they've finished their 4 years of high school. Another very important question is, when should IPS sessions be held? There is no best approach, but you do need to look at the scheduling options that'll fit for your school. Some schools do it during a particular course, like health, that's being taken by all grade levels. Some have an advisory period, and they use that period. It really just depends on what's working for your school in order to have that, but it is a priority that you set time aside for this to be taken care of during the day for students. Training the school staff. You need to organize your software system you need to organize your training into software system training and non-technical training. Those are 2 different ways that we have to look at approaching the students with the individual plan of study. So if I'm a staff member and I teach English and I'm going to have an advisory full of freshmen, not only do I need training on how I use the software system, but I also need to know how to engage students, how to facilitate IPS activities in small groups, and to motivate students to complete their IPS by actually taking the time to look at all of the issues and go through all of the activities. So those are 2 different types of training that you're going to need to set up as a school to help your staff fully implement an individual plan of study. So as you're looking at those roles for adult stakeholders, just remember that the principal is going to be promoting the successful implementation of the IPS program. Teachers are going to contribute to implementation in multiple ways. They can provide feedback to the IPS team. They're going to send referrals to the counselors. They're going to look at the curriculum and see where it ties into what they may already be teaching. And they're going to be hosting those advisory sessions if that's the model you choose to go with. School counselors also take on a huge role. They support implementing the IPS sessions. They might model the sessions for teachers, provide feedback to the team, incorporate information and resources in student counseling sessions as well. It's vital to get your parents and your community involved. You need to make sure that parents understand the IPS, the purpose behind it, and how they can engage in it to help communicate with their students regarding what their goals are post-secondary. Finally, we just need to talk about looking at IPS as an ongoing assessment. So you're going to need to go back and revisit your IPS plan every year to see what's working and what isn't working, what's working for your students, what's working for your staff, and what's working for your parents. So hopefully this reference sheet will help you if you're starting to implement IPS at your school, and it's available on the KSDE website. You just type in IPS in the search bar and it'll take you to the page that has all of our IPS resources. So we're going to talk a little bit about the process today as well. So the process of implementing an IPS could be done in 4 different models. We have the counselor-centered model, we have the career advisor system, the career advocate, and a hybrid, which would be any combination of models 1 through 3. I think everyone's familiar with the counselor-centered model. That's what we've used for years, where the counselor comes in and works with students around what their goals are. A career advisor system is when a school hires particular staff. I'm sorry, that's career advisor system, Jay, is that's where all school staff members implement the IPS curriculum. And so, like I said earlier, if I'm a teacher and I'm teaching English, I'm now also a career advisor during the advisory period. The third model is the career advocate, and that's the one where we hire individuals specifically just to implement IPS curriculum. And the hybrid is any combination of those models. So let's look at the hybrid in particular today. So when we've talked to some fully implemented schools, they've reported the value and the strength of involving all staff in IPS development. How can schools most effectively address each type of activity using the hybrid model? Well, you may have a counselor who is really strong in scheduling, and they're going to help those students select their courses. You might have a career advocate in your school that's going to help students select their courses and set goals. You could have a course where students are going to do portfolio development, or they're going to work on career exploration, and you could have advisory at the same time. So what that looks like is you have a student who has an advisory where they identify their career interests, abilities, and preferences. They go to the counselor or the career advocate to set up their goals, create and update a post-secondary plan, and select courses at the high school that relate to that plan. They also have a CTE course where they might get direct instruction around exploring and researching post-secondary options, developing a portfolio, or even going on some field trips or having some job shadow activities related to the area that they're interested in. A hybrid seems to be the model that most schools are going to. Sorry, Jay.
No, that's all right. I think that's a really good point that we don't want to rush past. Is that this spring or last year when we went out and talked to schools, we basically came up with those top 3 models there, 1 through 3, and then as we got into it more and really investigated further with those districts, we found out that most districts were going with components of all 3 of those. So the hybrid model came to be, and this fall, many more schools are implementing this fall, and what we're hearing from those schools is that the hybrid model, mainly due to those 2 top bullet points on this slide, just the value and the strength of involving all staff in a small way in IPS development, small or large, depending on the capabilities of the adult who's interacting with the student and the family and their individual plans of study. So I think it's a really good summary of the hybrid model.
So we're looking at the actual IPS process for the student. If you start in the top right corner of identify career interests, abilities, and preferences, The next step for the student is to set goals, create and update post-secondary plan, then explore research post-secondary options, select the courses in high school that they want that are going to relate to those goals, do some career exploration, develop their portfolio, and repeat the process. This is a process that's going to go on from middle grades all the way through high school, and if you think about it, we're probably still doing it today. If you look at the career exploration component, off to the side we have through professional learning experiences, job shadow, internship, career fair, mock interviews, workplace tour, etc. We need to make sure that we are exposing our students to as many opportunities as possible to experience the career that they think that they're wanting to engage in. Under develop portfolio, this can include the resume, cover letter, employability skills documentation, assessment results, extracurricular involvement, leadership activities, any number of things. But that should begin in the middle grades and follow the student through high school so that they have a complete portfolio of all of the work that they've achieved over the course of their secondary education. Well, let's talk a little bit about the product. The minimum components of a complete IPS include a graduated series of strength finders and career interest inventories to help students identify preference toward career clusters. Well, what we mean by that is we don't want them to just take one interest inventory in 10th grade because they took the ACT Aspire and then they don't visit again until their senior year. If we're going through that IPS process with the student, they need to be continually reevaluating their strengths and weaknesses, abilities, interests, and learning preferences. And so that's a major component of having a complete individual plan of study. If the school is implementing the IPS, they should have 8th through 12th grade scheduling process with course selections based on career interests. So somehow you need to be able to show that the courses students are enrolling in tied to those interest inventories that they have completed. The third component is a general post-secondary plan. We don't favor a particular plan. It could be really whatever the student thinks aligns for them. Workforce, military, certification program, 2-year college, or 4-year college. One thing we have figured out, I think, pretty much as a society is we're going to have some type of training after school. For the most part. There are some kids that can go straight into the workforce, but for the most part, our students are going to need to get some type of certification or a degree in order to actually be able to reach the middle class and successfully contribute to our society. And the fourth component is a portable electronic portfolio like we talked about before. We want it to be electronic because we want to make sure that student can access that at any point in time from wherever they are and whatever their choices lead them to. So some IPS reminders on the product. Schools do not have to purchase a web-based product. There are many schools out there doing programs with Google Docs, with ASVAB, with ONET, ACT, all types of different processes that they're using. That is absolutely fine as long as you're hitting those 4 components. You should be good to go as far as implementing that individual plan of study. But Career Cruising is the state preferred vendor, and so that means that we have a process that you can go through to get your startup costs paid for that. To get that established in your school, you're going to be responsible for the subscription costs. However, the startup costs, we will work that out with you if you're choosing to go with Career Cruising. So we will be following the same process for 2017 as we followed in 2016 for reimbursing those who sign up for new service. Training for new or interested schools will be at the CTE pre-conference on February 6th in Manhattan. So we do have a pre-conference session available for anyone who's interested in checking out Career Cruising or possibly signing up, or if you've just recently signed up and you have questions, you are more than welcome to come to the pre-conference that we have available on February 6th.
So I'm going to talk about just the what Kathleen alluded to about the reimbursement program, and this is specifically for those schools that are signing up for new service with career cruising. So last year, I say last year, is actually 2016, but from January 1 to September 1 of 2016, we had over 150 school districts sign up for career cruising. And how that works is the districts pay both the startup costs and the subscription costs up front. And then after September 1, KSDE, using Perkins Reserve dollars, will reimburse school districts for their startup costs, which are a one-time cost. You're doing all your data migration and your uploads. That's a one-time cost, and we're reimbursing, KSD's reimbursing schools for that with career cruising. And then if you are in a school district with 500 students or less for grades 6 through 12, then your subscription costs are a flat rate of $1,500 for both your middle and high school buildings. And so that tends to, if you're a really small school, it tends to be pretty expensive per student. So what KSDE has done, and this is for just the first year of service with career cruising, is we will reimburse school districts for half the cost of their subscription costs if you're a district with 500 students or less in grades 6 through 12. So that's about $750, which is half your cost of your subscription costs. After the first year, then the district that would then pick up the full subscription costs for years 2 and on, as long as they stay with career cruising. So this is a real busy slide, but it really breaks it down in subscription costs and startup costs and the process we're going through to reimburse. So I'm going to continue. We're going to switch gears here. Many of you that are listening know that we sent out a survey in September. Is the IPS implementation survey. We wanted to establish a baseline this year of where schools are, middle schools and high schools across the state are with implementing individual plans of study, both the product and the process with their students. We're going to continue to survey schools in the spring of 2017, in the fall of 2017, and then in the spring of 2018 to finalize and pretty much ask the same questions, just to get a really clear picture of how well implemented individual plans of study are across the state. So I wanted to take a brief moment to show you the results of the survey. And I do want you to know that the results of the survey that I'm showing you here, it is linked on our IPS webpage. So you can access this by going to ksde.org and navigating to the IPS webpage, and you'll see the IPS implementation survey results for 2016. So we had 691 responses, and I'm not going to take you through the entire, I think it's a 17 question survey, but I did want to highlight just a few responses and survey questions that we asked. So we sent this to districts and did not limit the number of responses from each district, but we've got a good percentage of districts responding. So the first question I want to just cover briefly is number 5. What elements are currently included in the IPS for students? As many of you know, that we have our 4 minimum components, and you can see those represented here. If you hover over the colored bar, you'll see the actual full text of what the response is. So documentation of career interests is huge. That's where it really starts. A written post-secondary goals and post-secondary plan section. Portfolio was a little less identified, but we think that might be due to schools that haven't fully implemented that, and we know the portfolio is something maybe that becomes more important the further you're into high school. This one shocked us a little bit, including academic assessment scores, with us reducing the footprint of state assessments in Kansas, but it was still good to see that this is a repository for all different types of learning that the student is going through while they're in high school and middle school. So the next question I want to navigate to is number 6. What career interest inventories are being used with the students or being administered? ONET is a free tool. Naviance is a whole package like Career Cruising, and they have their own set of and suite of assessments. Cooter Navigator, which is the Kansas Career Pipeline, that also is an all-inclusive product. Is same as Career Cruising. You can see that's the most popular, most used career interest inventory across the state. And I will say with these 3 products, those are a graduated series of assessments. It's not just one like some of the others that are on this list. ACT Explorer is a one-time, and you can administer it multiple times to the same student, but it is virtually the same test or assessment. The ASVAB, a lot of people don't think of that assessment maybe as a career interest inventory assessment, but it is. It has quite a few test items on the ASVAB. Which is the military entrance exam, but it has quite a few test items that relate to students' career interests. Number 8, in which grades do students begin their IPS? So you can see 29.1% is 8th grade, which is good to see. We feel like at least by the 8th grade level to start this, because they're students are going to identify career interests, and then they need to be selecting courses at the high school level based on those career interests, not on maybe other things as they move forward. So 7th grade, 6th grade and below, quite a few responses, and then 9th grade. And we were a little concerned with 9th grade again because if students wait until 9th grade, they're already taking courses maybe in the students' minds and everybody else's minds that really count. And so you want to identify career interests prior to selecting courses. Number 10, what is the implementation model of the district's IPS program? This is a part that Kathleen really focused on today. And so you can see that the most popular model is the career advisor system, where all school staff implement the IPS program. I think as we move forward with this and change the maybe the nature of the question, you can see that we'll see more people in the green bar than hybrid. But quite a few responses, and then the counselor-centered system. And number 14, what implementation activities have occurred? So the most common response was develop the timeline and framework. That makes sense as schools don't want to rush into anything and set up maybe a not as robust system as possible. So developing a timeline and a framework is a good planning tool moving forward. Career interest inventories have been identified. Again, that's where it all starts. So those were good results as well. And then the last one is how often, number 15, how often will a review and update of the IPS and goals for each student be scheduled? This one initially concerned us, but I talked to a few schools that did respond. The most common response was annual, so once a year. I think when schools answered this question, they read this as the student actually updating the goals. And when we wrote the test survey question, I think our mindset was more how often is the student, the family, and the teacher interacting with the IPS and working on it. So we need to shore up the question. But obviously annually is not enough if we're looking at helping students really develop a robust IPS. So with that there are other who wants to test? Survey questions that you could take a look at your leisure. I'm going to navigate back to the PowerPoint. Again, that survey and those results are posted to the IPS webpage on the KSDE main site. So if you have some free time, take a look. So just some parting thoughts as we wrap this up. As Kathleen mentioned, schools are not required to use a vendor for the IPS product to pay for anything. You can develop your own. As long as the 4 minimum components are present, schools can create their own. And our expectation right now in the short term is that by the end of the 17-18 school year, that every middle school and high school in Kansas will have both an IPS product and a process in place so they can start implementing that with a cohort of students, whether that be all grades in middle and high school or one. We, as an internal work group, and then working with an external IPS group made up of your peers across the state, we're going to develop a timeline in the out years past 17-18 for the school years of 18-19, 19-20, as far as what IPS, the measures that we're going to put in place and how fully implemented and what, the student grades that need to be developing individual plans of study. Right now, just for the short term, we're focused on, by the end of 17-18, helping schools implement a product and a process. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us on individual plans of study. We've done a lot of speaking engagements across the state, a lot of trainings going on around individual plans of study. We've got great partners across the state in our service centers and our local school districts to provide that training. So thank you for being involved in that. Myself, Kathleen, and Kent Reed are anxious, ready, and willing and able to help you. Just give us a call, contact us, we'll be there. The last thing is I do want to point you to some resources. Our IPS webpage, as mentioned before. We are on Twitter. It's at KSDE_CTE. It's really more of a retweet account instead of a tweet account. Nothing original. And then there is Career Cruising if you're looking into that state preferred vendor. So, Kathleen, any closing comments?
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for listening in out there. Have a great day.
Hello, Kansas. This is Scott Meyers with you once again to talk to you about the latest, greatest information regarding the new accreditation system for the state of Kansas. Today, the topic du jour, we will be talking about the Accreditation Review Committee, a pivotal stop along the way to having a system receive their accreditation status from the State Board of Education. So what is known as the Accreditation Review Committee, commonly known as ARC, and I'll be using ARC from here on out, as it says on the screen, it's a group of practitioners who will come together, who will actually make the final recommendation to the State Board of Education based on the information that they receive from the outside validation teams. If you remember previous sessions here on Hot Topic sessions, I've covered the work of the outside validation team, or the OVT. Well, it's the ARC that receives the recommendations that come from the OVT, who then work with the materials and then ultimately make a recommendation to the state board. That said, it's important to make sure people understand it is not just a rubber stamp. Good, hard work will take place at the ARC in determining the recommendations themselves, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So, the duties of the ARC include a variety of different things on the screen right now. As we move forward and we have other potential supporters coming forward to help with the accreditation work across the state, it will be the ARC that does the vetting of those different systems to say, yep, you're welcome to come work in this space, or we need to make some adjustments before you can do so. They actually will receive the recommendation from OVT, as I mentioned previously. If there are areas that need improvement, otherwise known as areas for improvement, known as AFIs, it would be the ARC that would either verify, agree with, or eliminate or add in those AFIs to the OVT reports. So when the information is turned in from the on-site visits and a variety of data and a final recommendation is made to the ARC will have the authority to remove areas for improvement or to add in areas for improvement. Along with that, they would have the authority to initiate focus visits because, if you'll recall, there are three various statuses and individual systems can receive within accreditation. They can be accredited, they can be conditionally accredited, or they can be not accredited. As our wont here in Kansas, if a system comes back with a recommendation of conditionally accredited or not accredited, the work is not finished, the ARC would initiate focus visits where the OVT or some other group, we've not fully determined that yet, will go back out and work with the systems to help them clear their areas for improvement. That goes hand in hand along with investigates inquiries as to what might be going on with a system's accreditation status. Then ultimately, the final part of this makes the actual recommendation to the Kansas State Board of Education concerning an individual educational system's accreditation status. And of course, it's the Kansas State Board of Education who determines ultimately a system's accreditation status. So this slide right here will tell you what the ARC does. And of course, while I'm talking about this, we will need people from the field to participate on the ARC. You'll see on this slide here, we'll need a number of people who will be highly trained in being involved in this sort of work. As you can see, it says 12, 16, 20. We've not fully determined how large this group will be, but it will be large enough so when the group comes together 4 times a year, we'll be able to split into subcommittees to work with the various systems recommendations that will be coming due. If everything falls out the way we hope it does, with some 70 odd systems coming forward each year for their accreditation determination, that's a heavy lift. And so in order to make that manageable, we will need a large group of people on the ARC. And then of course, when we come together, they will divide out so as to manage or handle the sheer weight of paper load that needs to be done. For those of you out there who have been involved at the higher ed level with accreditation determination, there is a absolutely mirror image group in the higher ed world that does this sort of work. They're called the ERC, the Evaluation Review Committee. Well, this ARC, Accreditation Review Committee, will function in just the same manner. And what happens with the ERC, this group of 30 some odd people come together and then they divide out into subgroups and deal with the various program and accreditation recommendations that come forward. So just a way for us to make sure that we're able to make this lift. And then ultimately the whole, as the subcommittees break out, they do the determination, and then it goes back to the whole for a vote. I personally served on the ERC back when I was in the field, and we'd sit in the boardroom back in the old building, and we'd divide out into different groups. We'd work on individual reports, and then come back as a whole for the total vote, which ultimately went on to the state board. All right, what you see on the slide here now is the flow. And if you just look at it as a whole, it's kind of like a Jason Pollock picture, kind of hard to follow. But if you start looking at it individually, and we will do that now, you'll see, if you're able to see my mouse up on the screen, this is where the recommendation comes in from the OVT to the ARC. And if everything's fine and dandy, the OVT says, hey, things are looking good, they've been engaged in a meaningful process, and it looks like they're showing growth, then the ARC would probably make a recommendation for full accreditation, which would then go to the state board, and that system would be fully accredited. Well, that's easy. That's an easy route right there. Now, if things are just not slightly all the way there yet, so the recommendation comes to the ARC from the OVT, and let's say there are some AFIs, areas for improvement, and it could be in the process realm or in the results realm. It'll come to the ARC, and the ARC would say, yep, we agree with that, or you know what, we're going to add this one in as well. So then the system, it'd be sent back to the system, and the system would have an opportunity to write a rejoinder or a response, if you want to call it that, to the AFI. So system ABC, the OVT sends it to the ARC, and they see that there are some areas for improvement. So they send that notification to the system ABC, and that system says, oh, whoa, here's some answers for you. And they write up a rejoinder, is a fancy term. It means a response. So then it goes back to the ARC, and they make a recommendation. If the AFIs are cleared, so the system answers the questions, because let's say some information was missing, or they just, no, we disagree, and here's why. And that carries the day, then the recommendation could go straight to the board again. It's for full accreditation. However, it is possible that it could also go over to the realm of conditional accreditation. And if that occurs, then of course a different recommendation goes to the state board for conditional accreditation, and that would trigger what is known as a focus visit a year and a half later for the OVT or whatever group we determine. Ultimately, we haven't made that decision yet. We'll then go back out on site to see, well, what's been going on. You know, the system received conditional accreditation because of these issues. So the focus visit follows up, and they say, okay, you had those problems or those issues before. What have you done about it? And so then final ARC recommendation, it'd go through that process again, and it goes toward full accreditation or do not accredit. There would not be a double secret probation period, a la Animal House. It'll be at that point. We've gone through the entire system once, the cycle, gone through the focus visit, and either we'll come through this fine, full accreditation, or the recommendation could go forward for do not accredit. But of course, those two recommendations go to the state board who makes the final determination. If the recommendation is not to accredit and the state board were to agree with that, that would trigger an intensive support cycle for 4 years. And we're not going to spend time on that today, but we're not just leave people hanging. Work would continue to get whatever is going on in the system, get it going the right way. So just so you can, another way of looking at this pictorial are just some bulleted pages. If you like to look at things better in that manner, feel free to go back and forth as much as you'd like to find your way. So if the OVT sends it to you and all's well, then with no AFIs, chances are the state board would go along with the recommendation for full accreditation. So that's a pretty simple one, as I said before. If, for however reason, there are some AFIs that occur, well, still out of that scenario, two things could occur. You could be accredited still because the areas for improvement are resolved, addressed, fixed, whatever. Or if they're not, then the recommendation would come through for accredited conditional. Once again, always keep in mind, it's the state board making the final determination. These are just recommendations from this group of well-trained practitioners. But the state board are the individuals who are vested with the responsibility of actually casting their votes. Final ARC recommendation would be, let's say we went through a system of this accredited conditional. Once again, if you remember back on this pictorial, we're talking about this area over here now. We're over here where we're doing some intensive work with the focus visit. What could occur is everything gets resolved, accredited. Or it could be they're not resolved, and so it's not accredited. And so we could be placed on a 4-year intensive support program. So there you go. That, in a nutshell, that is what the ARC, or the Accreditation Review Committee, does. We will need members who will then ultimately receive training on how to receive reports, determine, analyze data, look beyond just the black and white into the report itself, and make some hard-hitting decisions. Information will be coming out as the year goes on for people who are interested in getting involved in this process. We need you. So be watching for that information, and then come forward. Send me your name or Bill, or send it to Kelly, and we'll make sure we get the training for you. You do need to know, if you decide to go into this area, if you want to get involved in this, there'll be at least 4 meetings a year, probably 2-day meetings each. And of course, we're wanting to, if we bring on, I'm just pick a easy number, 30 people. Let's say we have 30 people on the committee. I would want them to be staggered as to when people come on and off the committee. So it'd probably be just like we do everything else. People can serve 2 terms, if you will. A term would be, just for the math's sake of using 30, let's say 6 years. That's a long term, but let's say it's 6 years. Then every 2 years, a new group or a new wave of people would join, and a group would drop off. So not saying it's going to be 30 people, not saying it's going to be a 6-year term. Probably not a 6-year term. Probably more likely to be like a 4-year term. But the idea is we need have experienced people at the table at all times, bringing on or onboarding the new people. So that as we move down the path on this, we always have a well vetted, versed, trained group to work in this area. So as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please do not hesitate to give me a holler. You can either call the phone number there or send an email, or you can send an email to the Hot Topics hotline. So with that, I'm signing off, and I hope you all enjoy a fine Thanksgiving break.